Welcome back to another video. On this beautiful morning, just walking the pasture and enjoying springtime. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the difference between homesteading and farming and what that's looked like in our context. Before we get into it, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Apples are starting to leaf out in the tree lanes, and the pears are already in full swing, looking really good. These are the first cherry blossoms of Wild East. Cherry trees have a particular place in my heart because they were the first tree I have any memory of picking fruit off of up in Montana, where my family would go every year to visit family and spend time by the lakes. We would pick so many cherries in the summertime, and those are some of my early formative memories of enjoying the fruits of these beautiful perennials. I wanted to talk in this video a little bit about our experience transitioning from homesteading into farming full-time for our income, and how that journey progressed for us and why we decided to make that leap, as well as some of the differences between homesteading and farming. Oftentimes I think they get conflated with one another, and I really think it's important to draw that distinction between what is a homestead and what is a farm. In my mind, a homestead is smaller home scale production that isn't focused on the economic outcomes and running a business, whereas running a farm full time, we're enjoying all of the day-to-day elements that drew us into farming while treating it like a full-time business, like we would treat any other business. And that's really key to make it work. And that transition can be really challenging, more challenging in a lot of cases than actually increasing production to farm scale numbers. We started homesteading in 2017 after moving from a house more or less in the city in Asheville to a place still within Asheville limits, but quite a bit more rural, near Swannanoa. And it was a little 5-acre property tucked back in a glorious cove that backed up to a part of national forest that we got to know very well. And in our first year, we had no experience growing food. We started out just putting some tomatoes and some kale and just throwing whatever seeds came our way in the ground. And we took that approach early on of just doing trial by fire and learning as we went. And throughout that time, over the years, for us to really explore the beauty of growing vegetables and learning each year as we went. And the difference between our first year in 2017 and our last year living at that homestead in how much food we were producing for ourselves was really exponential. In the first year, we would make the occasional omelet with eggs from the layers and veggies from the garden that was 100% grown by us, and that was extremely gratifying. And by the end, really about 80% of our food was coming from right on that small property where we were producing meat chickens and raising a big garden that was more and more productive each year, and food that I was growing at the farm I was managing. And so that really built our confidence in thinking, well, if we can produce this much food for ourselves, the leap to farming full time and producing excess to sell to the community was less and less far in the distance as time went on at Shope Creek. And we also ran different animals and learned about breeding animals and raising them on a home scale production and all the considerations. So in our first year, we had a small flock of laying hens that grew over time. We were given by a friend a small group of breeding rabbits that we raised for meat for a little over 2 years. And it was a really beautiful time in our lives where we just became closer and closer to our food. Lyric and I bonded a lot early on in our relationship over our shared love of high quality, beautiful, locally grown, very healthy food, as well as our love of being outside and exploring the beauty of Southern Appalachia. And nestled in that little homestead there, we were able to do both every single day and grow more of our own food as the years went by. So by just about a year and a half into living there and experimenting and homesteading and growing more and putting up more of our own food, we made the decision that we wanted to take the leap into farming full time. And we really had no idea in 2018 what exactly that would look like. But once we set our intentions on that trajectory, we never looked back. We started learning and absorbing as much information as we could from local resources and online, and reading books and trialing things on a small scale ourselves, gaining skills. And over those next few years, really building up our base for starting Wild East. In 2020, I got a job managing a commercial 8-acre production vegetable farm that was all organic. And while even from that point, we knew that we didn't want to do broad scale tractor based organic vegetables, we were certain that that experience that I would gain there would contribute so much to starting up the farm that we have. I think that working on and particularly managing another farm before starting your own is a really critical step for our success, at least, and having that experience in production scale agriculture and being on the in and out of running a business in that way really shallowed out the learning curve in starting Wild East. I think the main difference between homesteading and farming really is that focus on commercial production and running a business and really honing in on the numbers and making the numbers work. Something that we've done on the farm so that we're not strictly focused on it in a business sense is we've integrated different things that more resemble a homestead. So the way we run the sheep, we have really no commercial production intentions for the sheep. We spend time with them in a way that isn't commercially economic if we're paying ourselves hourly, but we do it because we enjoy it, and we do it because it's a beautiful process of being out and observing life. And they also serve wonderful functions for the landscape that integrate into our commercial enterprises. But part of our strategy is having elements of what we do that are purely joy based. And I think that's important for folks who can do so. We're fortunate to be on a relatively large land base that we can integrate different elements, but even on a smaller land base, say there's 1 acre and you have half an acre, 3/4 of it in market garden, whether it's keeping bees or raising rabbits for meat or a small flock of laying hens or just a patch of perennial flowers and herbs and trees and shrubs that you like to grow. Doing so, in my experience, brings a lot more joy to the day-to-day because it's a constant reminder of why we do this and centers me in the practice of slowing down and enjoying noticing the little things. during our time homesteading, we were also gaining a ton of skills in really relevant areas. Before I started managing that farm, I was working in arboriculture and getting really skilled with a chainsaw and tree identification and dendrology, the study of trees. And that transitioned me to a stint in forestry and worked some in field biology. Well, Lyric was managing projects for local nonprofits that focused on local food distribution and really integrating with that community that really in Western North Carolina serves as the backbone for a lot of the farms around here and makes a very viable farm ecosystem in this small region. So she was building up community networks and skills in communication, and I was gaining some of those hard skills where we were both teaching each other on the homestead in this beautiful setting. And without that incubation period, I don't think we could have started Wild East as quickly as we have and scaled up operations in the way that we have in a short amount of time. While we spent a lot of time fantasizing about the farm during those years and dreaming up visions and designs and all kinds of considerations, it never felt like we were in a rushed process to get the farm. And we were really fortunate to be in a place that we loved being so much and that we didn't feel that push. But also, we really recognized that that period, we were almost like the chicks, we were in the brooder, and we had to be in the brooder for a certain amount of time before we could flourish in the field or on the farm. And, you know, we technically started the farm in 2023, was our first year really producing here at Wild East. But in so many ways, with the skills and the knowledge and that period of growth that preceded us landing here, we started the farm all the way back in 2017 in so many ways. I've talked about it before, and I'm very fascinated by the phenomena of how common it is for people in a romantic partnership to pursue farming as a livelihood together. And so many of the soft skills that we gained during that time were in our communication with one another and learning how to engage with a small garden and engage with home scale animal production and think about different elements on the landscape together that once we got here, we really knew what skills each of us brought and how to clearly communicate with one another and run a business. I think that that's one of the steepest learning curves for a lot of folks is learning not just how to run a farm, not just how to run a farm business, but how to run a farm business with a romantic partner. And while that's not everyone's situation, it's extremely common. And I believe it's one of the more challenging things you can embark on because there's so many dynamics that are so complex that having a period of time to practice before there is a real business in place and real economic pressure is so important, or at least it has been in our experience. Now, part of running a mixed farm and having so much diversity is that we don't just produce for market. Everything we produce here, we fill our freezers and fill our fridge and fill our cellar with the produce and the meats that we raise here at Wild East. And so the way we see it is we run a homestead and we've just scaled up certain elements to be commercially viable. And as I've said before, the market gardens and the pastured poultry are the backbones of the farm. But whether or not we were farming, we would still be raising a big garden and still be raising meat birds for ourselves and running pigs in the woods and having sheep and all the things we're doing. We've just strategically designed specific elements so that we can be here full time and we can farm full time for our living. And that's really important to us. Farms are historically the economic backbone of rural communities. And in rural America, rural Western North Carolina, really globally, we've seen as small farm numbers have declined over the last century or two, rural community health has declined tremendously at the same time. And that's largely in part because without small farms and with the increase in larger mechanization of farms, humans in the rural landscape have become redundant. And so the more small farms and more homesteads that are popping up, we don't see as competition. We just see it as a beautiful transition of bringing people back onto the land and out into rural spaces and revitalizing communities that have been hemorrhaging resources for quite a long time now. So if you're thinking of starting your own farm and you're in the early stages of your journey, I can only speak from my experience, but I would say that starting with a homestead and really dialing in home scale food production before jumping into all the challenges and growth that's required to run a commercially viable farm enterprise is extremely important. It's helped us in our relationship. It's helped us have time to build the necessary skills to flatten our learning curve. It's helped us integrate into the Western North Carolina community for long enough that we had sales outlets, we had community, we had support from nonprofits before we even started the farm. And that has been a big part of our success early on in the business. And like I said, it's easy sometimes to fantasize about the dream farm and everything that can be. But it was really grounding for me through those years before landing at Wild East to always really reflect on how necessary that part of the process was. Starting a farm isn't something that should be a quick process necessarily. It's with how complex it is right that it takes time. And I've talked about it in other videos, how important it is to really cherish that process and not try to speed it along, because each step on our journey has been a special and necessary and completely uh, invaluable part of getting to where we are today. So those are just some thoughts on homesteading versus farming and some of our background before landing at Wild East. We did a full length podcast interview with the no-till growers that's going to be released shortly in a few days that you should definitely check out on a panel with Aaron up at the Cedar Chest Farm in Virginia. And we talked about our experiences transitioning from homesteading to farming. So if you want to hear more about our journey in an in-depth interview format, you can check that out as soon as it's released. I'll put a link in the description as soon as it's out. And I appreciate you watching. Please like the video and leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you next time.